Good day, everyone. On behalf of Director Denise O'Donnell at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, let me welcome you to this webinar on procurement issues with body-worn cameras. My name is Chip Coldren. I'm the Managing Director for Justice Programs at the CNA Institute for Public Research, the Director of Technical Assistance for the Bureau of Justice Assistance's Body-Worn Camera Technical Assistance Program, and I will provide the introduction for today's webinar. Today's webinar focuses on a very important issue for the body-worn camera pilot implementation program sites, procurement. A number of our sites have completed procurement processes for their camera initiatives, especially the enhancement sites, so they have good lessons and experience to impart to us. And many others are in their procurement processes or will soon move in that direction. They could certainly benefit from what others have experienced. So, today's webinar will cover a few topics that we think are very pertinent to body-worn camera procurement. Most importantly, we will hear from several police agencies that have purchased body-worn cameras on the do's and don'ts regarding procurement, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions of them. The site representatives we will hear from today are Deputy Chief Mike Petty from the Fayetteville, North Carolina Police Department and Sergeant Doug Warwick from the Milwaukee Police Department. We thank them both for working with us to put this webinar together and for their participation today. Then we'll hear from Craig Uchida of Justice and Security Strategies. JSS is one of our partners, along with Arizona State University, in the BJA Body-Worn Camera Technical Assistance Program. They have compiled some technical assistance resources around procurement that we think will be helpful to you. Finally, we'll hear from Stephen Fender, policy analyst at BJA, on some basic procurement guidelines from the Bureau. So thanks as well to Craig and Stephen for working on this with us and joining us today. This is the first in a series of webinars sponsored by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and coordinated by CNA for the Body-Worn Camera Technical Assistance Program. We thank the Bureau for its investment in the Body-Worn Camera Grant Program, in the Body-Worn Camera Toolkit, and in a range of technical assistance resources and opportunities for agencies implementing body-worn cameras. The Bureau supports state, county, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies in many, many ways, and we are grateful that they do. Permit me to make a few other comments, and then I'll turn this over to Mike Petty from Fayetteville. This webinar is recorded for the benefit of others who may view it later on our website, so please be mindful when you make your remarks that they're being recorded. There will be opportunities for questions and participation during the webinar, so please make your thoughts and questions known. I can assure you that others will appreciate hearing what you have to say. If you don't get a chance to voice your comments or questions, please use the chat utility to the right of your screen, and we'll do our best to respond to your input. Following the webinar, you will receive a request to evaluate it. Please complete the evaluation, and please give us your honest thoughts and recommendations. And please let us know what other topics you think we should cover on future webinars. I'd also like to thank Dominique Burton and Zoe Thorkeldson at CNA, who do the background technical work to make sure these webinars go smoothly. And I know they would want me to remind everybody that typically these webinars start with everybody on mute. So if you want to say something, you need to get off mute by hitting *6, and then you can get back on the mute function by hitting #6. And I think the important thing to understand that to reduce the background noise, if you're not speaking, please put your phone on mute so we don't hear extraneous noise during the webinar. So thank you for a few moments of your time for those introductory remarks. I'd like to now turn this over to Deputy Chief Petty from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Chief, please tell us about your department's procurement experience.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and to Chip talking about the background, I apologize if you hear a train go by. Our city council felt the need to build our station right next to the tracks, but hopefully I can get done for the next round. So they asked me to talk to you guys today about do's and don'ts and what we've learned in our procurement process. And just to give you a little background, we are a grant recipient, and we have full deployment at this time. So I'm going to hopefully give you guys some tips and measures on possible things you can avoid. The first thing we recommend is that you beta test as many brands as possible. Most of these companies have a free testing period that they'll allow you to utilize their cameras, and always you use everything you can to your benefit. But some of the things we also looked at during that beta testing period was the battery life. We tested for 18 months. We wanted to make sure that these cameras met our expectations and what we envisioned our program to be. We wanted to make sure that the battery life consisted for an entire shift. Their sharing capabilities. If we want to get this video out to other entities, how are we going to do that? Like most agencies, we're trying to get away from the DVD burning business. What type of retention capabilities do they have? Retention, your amounts and your retention are going to affect a lot of things. Number one, your storage, which we'll talk about here shortly. Also, what kind of mounting options do they give to you? Many companies have very limited scope of where you can mount on your uniforms these cameras, and for us that was a major issue. We wanted to give as many options as possible. So we checked the different companies and what type of options they had. So we really took a look at the proof of concept for each company to see if they would meet our expectations in the usability department, the reviewing capabilities, and the sharing of the video. Those were the main functions. And that leads me into the next topic, was measure the body-worn camera's functionality and operability. Again, the different mounting options. As I said, we didn't want chest mounts. But a big thing for us was the charging and uploading of this video. How was that done? We put out to our citizenry and our politicians that if an officer was in uniform, they were going to have a camera mounted to them. So we have a take-home car program, and we quickly realized, and we hadn't expected this, but at some point that officer has to dock that camera and turn it off so it starts uploading. So we potentially would have officers going home with no camera. One of our last officer-involved shootings was involving an officer that was on his way home. So that was a major indicator for us, was how is it uploaded, how is it charged, and I'll talk about that even further. The uploading was a concern. We looked over several options, one of which was could the officer take the cameras home and upload them at their house. Then we got into the concerns of where we're going to have to pay for their Wi-Fi service. Was their Wi-Fi service robust enough to handle that? So that option left the table, and we quickly decided. Hopefully I can get done for the next round. The other functionality and operability was how will the video be monitored today about part of our granting requirement. We did an in-kind match in our procurement process. We dedicated a full-time recording specialist for that grant. Our grant recipient, the usability and ease of operation, full deployment at this time. So I'm going to hopefully give you guys some tips. One thing we also recommend is that you research the history of that company. The first thing we recommend is that you beta test. There was relatively few companies in business that were doing the body cams that was still fairly new. Testing period has gone on. You can like everybody and always jumping on board, and there's a lot of companies coming out that typically weren't in the body camera business. I know GoPro. Some of the things we also looked at during that beta testing period was the battery life. We tested for 18 months. Research the company, make sure that they have a technology background, our expectations, and look at the back-end support they're going to be there. We wanted to make sure the battery life consisted for an entire shift. With a huge purchase sharing capability. Don't look at it like it's today. Look at it for this video out to other what type of replacement and warranty do they have? Like most agencies, many of these companies, once you buy the camera and walk away, you're deburning business. They don't offer any type what type of retention capabilities back-end support, so that's important. Retention, and one of the things you might look at if you were trying to get on your storage, a fairly decent deal on these cameras is this company trying to establish also what kind of mounting options do they there are companies out there that will offer discounts. These have very limited scope where you can mount on the test bed, if you will. For us, that was for individual areas. A major check that out and see if that can give as many options as possible. So we evaluate server versus cloud. This was a major issue for us, depending upon whether you have a. So we really took a look at the proof of concept for each company to see if they would meet our expectations, or if you're like us, usability to maintained by the city itself, reviewing capability. You may have to evaluate whether you want to function cloud-based or server-based. And that leads me into the next topic was measure the body that offers functionality and operability in the different mining options. Storage other than in-house. We didn't. So that was something that we seriously considered. But a big thing for us was rather charging and uploading of this video service, because if you have in-house bank of servers put out, you're going to have to monitor that citizenry and our politicians that keep that system up. So that's something that you may were going to have to consider. They were going to have. It really depends upon your relationship with your program. And we quickly realized, and we hadn't. Another thing we recommend is you start on your policy now, because as you get through that camera, turn into this process, turn it off so it starts uploading. Your policy may end up dictating what officers going home with no camera. One of our last officer-involved shootings was system you end up buying. What was involved in our policy now get everything in place. That was a major try not to reinvent the wheel. Was how we uploaded full citizen engagement, and I'll talk about that with our faith-based community and several activist groups around the area. Uploading was to outline their expectations, see what they were. There were several options expecting us to perform, and that may dictate your policy, and in turn the officer take the cameras home and upload them at their house. Examine the sharing capabilities. I've already started where we're going to have to talk to you about that. Their Wi-Fi service. One thing that everybody considers is that you reach out to your DA. So that option left the table, and we quickly prosecutors decide to touch base with them, make sure that they have buy-in. One of the things we did not realize in the beginning was that a DA or a prosecutor in a particular county or region may have multiple agencies. Chip, you still there? With multiple different types of cameras, so they have all these different systems trying to share data and video with them. I apologize. So you might want to touch the other functionality and operability was how will the video be monitored. That works for everybody. Part of our granting requirement, we did examine your redaction capabilities. We dedicated a full-time recording specialist. Necessarily recommend that you do any redaction in-house. Operation was most of these camera companies have very. One thing we also recommend is that you research the history of that company. The average redaction. When we first started, there was relatively few second of videos, so we imagined the body going frame by frame to redact it. But as time has gone on, extraordinary amount of time is jumping on for us, and there's a liability coming out. They didn't want to be able to redact. GoPro don't recommend anybody else doing that. Once you redact some type of system. So now research the company, make sure that they have a technology background. We definitely don't recommend that. And look at the back end warranty replacement to be there. What type of this is even services your company offer? Don't look at it like it's today. We particularly purchased a camera that offers what type of replacement warranty. They'll give us a new camera. These companies, once you buy a 5-year contract, will have 3 iterations of the camera. They don't offer any type of back-end support, so you buy it, you're done and gone. And one of the things you might look at if you were trying to get a extremely important, a fairly decent deal on these cameras in North Carolina, that we were able to establish a foothold in your state. Purchase off a cooperative. There are others out there that will offer discount contracts to buy ours at a better rate test bed, if you will. There's also sole source capabilities, which I believe are going to be talked about later in this presentation. Evaluate server versus cloud. This was a major issue for us. Investigate what's available to you. We have a very robust IT department, whether that IT department in-house, combined, or if you're like us, it's maintained by the city. If you're a smaller agency and you know somebody close to you have to evaluate whether you want, then you might be able to work out a deal storage with that agency. There's only one company there that always equals usually a discount. So make sure you just use the in-house available to you, something that we seriously considered. We would rather pay somebody to. We recommend that you speak to your officers as well. Servers, officers, you're going to have to monitor that. Who are you going to into this program? It'll also help you on the policy. That's something that you may be utilizing it, may consider too. And it really there are several relationship with your groups that want to know what will happen if an officer fails to activate their camera. Another thing we recommend is you start on your policy now, because as you get policy development, this process buy-in early can also help you. Your policy may end up dictating what type of meeting public expectations versus reality. This was a major issue for us. To start on your policy, speak now, get everything in place to, and again, try everything that the wheels, all of it. We recommend that you get obviously full citizen engagement, everything that's going to affect things. We partner with our faith-based community, like storage, several activist groups around the area. We'll talk about here to outline their expectations, see what they were difficult expecting us to perform, and that may dictate your policy, and in turn will dictate what type of camera you buy. North Carolina, particularly, If you examine the sharing capabilities, I've already started to talk to you about that. Performance is now part of their thing that I hope everybody considers is that you reach out to your TAs, you need to check your local prosecutors, touch base with them, make sure that the storage amount is a major issue. It's extremely expensive. Cameras are cheap by themselves, but your TTA or a prosecutor, to give you an example, county or region, North Carolina or here in Fayetteville, have multiple 300 cameras initially. Multiple different types of cameras, so they have all these contracts for 5 years trying to share data and video with them. So you might really need to touch base with them, what your agency or your municipality can afford versus what's expected of you. Again, examine your say, I'm going to record everything and keep everything, then that's obviously going to be necessarily recommend that you do any redaction in-house. Most unlimited storage camera companies have very servers to handle low-end software when it comes to that. The average redaction retention schedule, I believe it's 30 frames per second of video, and how an agent are going frame by frame to redact it. It's going to take an extraordinary amount of time. This was, for us, it was more of a liability issue. As I stated to you earlier, to be able to redact. We initially purchased 300 cameras. Once you redact, as we told our citizenry and our politicians have that capability, if a uniformed officer was on duty, they were going to have a camera. Don't recommend that. Again, warranty replacement, they have to charge them and document what type of video. So we began looking offer as we particularly purchased a camera that we were able to contract with the current company. 2.5 years, they'll give us a new and we did this several ways. So on a 5-year contract, we'll have we made sure they understood that this was a long-term deal. It was a long-term relationship. Once you buy it, we also had done and gone. Other products, know your local procurement laws. In our extremely important inventory, we were fortunate to use all those things combined that we were able to get a deal purchase off of cooperative. Not the same type of another agency that had a backup contract for our officers to buy ours at a better rate. We quickly realized that we had also sole source off duty as well, which I believe when we talked about that later in the presentation, wanted to make sure that they were protected. So we ended up buying 200 that you investigate what's available to partially area or state. 120 of them are using recommended control combined forces with another agency. Signed out to the if you're a smaller agency and you know somebody close to you as we were ready to buy, negotiate a deal, you might be able to based off of our total purchase with that agency to buy in bulk always. And usually the other option there is more of a policy issue. But make sure you just use the options available to your state. It's going to be something that your individual agencies will have to we recommend that you speak to your officers as well. Officers, make sure they have buy into this program. All bells and whistles. One of the things that we looked at is obviously if you get everything it costs more, community activist groups that want to know decided from an agency's perspective that we weren't going to buy everything that offered. That will be something that you'll probably companies coming out now. They have 1080p, they have night vision, getting buy-in, and for us it also help you determine we did not want our officers looking to buy the cameras to be able to see that what things meeting public expectations versus reality. This was a major issue for us. So clear when you speak to the public, detailed we want you to see the human record everything and release all of it. You need to consider when obviously if you record everything that's going to affect things at a reduced quality, more close to storage, then obviously that won't be as expensive. We'll talk about here in just a second. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about was difficult to actually meet those expectations versus many times you're under the gun to buy these cameras. North Carolina, the public, maybe your politicians, or even your chief, you use any type of video to evaluate an officer's performance. It's now part of their employee file at a particular time, and not considered public records. So you'll need to check your. But one of the things I recommend is that you do your homework on the front end. But the storage amount is a major issue. It's extremely expensive. Cameras are cheap in nature by themselves, satisfy you're paying for that storage. But as always, please stay in contact. Or here in Fayetteville, we purchase 300 cameras initially to make sure that you guys we have unlimited storage, and our contract for 5 years was $1.2 million. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions. So you really need to look at what your agency or your municipality can afford versus what's expected of you. If you say I'm going to record everything and keep everything, then that's obviously going to mean you're going to need to seek out some type of your department elect to wear unlimited storage, or you can buy enough servers to handle that issue. Well, we started looking at the cameras that were mounted, and most of the companies now are how long you're going to producing cameras where they mount on the chest or somewhere in that region. Do you need backup cameras? We had concerns that when the officer, as I stated to you earlier, raised their hand up if they were pointing a weapon, we initially purchased 300 cameras, block out the view. And as we told our citizens, our politicians, camera that offered if a uniformed officer was on duty, they were our officers now can either mount them on their lapel. At some point, they mount them on their collar, charge them, and dock them. We upload video. So we began looking headbands if they want to wear it on a band around their head. And this particular company, we were able to contract with a current company that will mount to a certain style. We did this several ways. We made sure they understood the mounting options that we have selected to get a better field of view. Obviously, the closer you get it to their eye. Other products that this company produces, clip on a hat in our if you wear baseball caps, but we used all those things coming out. The closer you can get it to the eye, the better perspective of the officer. Not the same type of camera. You're not going to get exactly a backup camera for our officers. And the reason we did that is we quickly realized that we had detectives that worked off duty as well, and when they worked off duty, they were
so we have a second question, or a couple questions we're going to sort of combine into one.
We ended up buying 200 backup cameras
that
we used partially.
Question about who
120 of them are used as backup for patrol,
for performing the redaction activities, and then about how many FOIA requests do you find that you're getting on, say, a weekly
negotiate a deal. We haven't gotten any thus far. The company that we utilize, and the other option there's laws on the books now in North Carolina they're trying to pass about this is going to be something that your individual agencies will release a video. Right now in North Carolina, any video that's part of an investigation is not public record. Any video that's part of this, like I said earlier, is used to evaluate an officer. So do you buy all the bells and whistles, and therefore not public records? So we haven't actually had any. If you get everything it costs more, we contract with does have decided from an agency's perspective that we weren't going to buy everything that offered. Purposely purchased them out now. They have 1080p. They have night vision. Electronically share for us all of our video with our DA's office. And they also the cameras to be able to share all video with our officers' fence for discovery purposes. The cameras can actually be so clear and so I hope that answers the question. They outsee the human eye. So that was something that
Michael, thank you very much. This is Chip. I'd like to ask one question, if I might, or maybe just a clarifying point, which I think is pretty straightforward. But
and the last thing
if you purchase the backup cameras like you have, and I've heard at least from one other agency that they've taken that route,
cameras.
That doesn't necessarily increase your storage costs,
maybe your
correct?
Politicians or even your chief. No, the number of cameras doesn't increase our storage, just the actual uploading of data. And one of the things I failed to mention was the other reason. But one of the things I recommend is that we decided to go with backup cameras because the cameras are individually assigned to the officers and the data is programmed into the camera because we even tried to examine the fact of, well, why can't they always turn them in at night, contact, consult your and BJA analyst for check them out to make sure that you guys the old days when you checked out radios, but that's not possible. That I'll look it up to any cameras. Like I said, they're assigned individually. The backups,
do we have any questions for
leeway.
Mike at this point?
And I also went to mention we've also mounted them on our SWAT team.
Hi, Chip. Yes, we have two questions that have come in.
Opinions
so the first is,
as to whether they should or should not, but as one person pointedly put it, you can go on YouTube and see any type of well, we started looking at the cameras that were mounted, and most of the companies now are it's really not producing cameras where they mount. Of course, we don't videotape somewhere in that region for the planning phases. We had concerns that when an officer raised their hand up if they were pointing a weapon at somebody, the hands would typically block out the view.
Thank you very much, Michael.
We opted to go with a camera that offered multiple mounting options.
Sure, please
and our officers
do.
now can either mount them on the lapel, they can mount them on the collar. We purchase some headbands that they want to wear on a band around their head, and this particular company also manufactures a clip that will mount to a certain style of sunglass. So
a lot of the issues,
those are the types of mounting options that we have selected to give a better field of view. Obviously, the closer you get it to their eye,
what happens
they have some a clip on a hat.
There is a
if you wear baseball caps, but the closer you can get it to the eye, the better perspective of the officer you're going to have. You're not going to get exactly what he sees or she sees,
most of these
but you're going to get a better perception from it.
Want to say, hey, give me all your data, give me all your data, but when it comes time to say,
so we have
hey,
a second question, or a couple questions we're going to combine into one about redaction and FOIA requests.
Was there any contractual language
question about who is responsible for performing the redaction activities, and then about how many FOIA requests do you find that you're getting on, say, a weekly basis?
Acquire this stuff.
We haven't gotten any thus far.
Anything that was addressed within that
the company that we utilize, there's laws spelled out now. The data itself is our property. They're sort of the keepers of it. So if we decide to right now in North Carolina, any video that's part of an investigation is not public and part ways, if you will, we'll still have access to that portion of the data on to evaluate an officer as part of his storage cloud, if you will, therefore not public record. So we haven't actually had any. The company we can have it downloaded, have backyard capabilities, but you can work all that in your contract. Yes. Purposely, that was a concern is that we can, electronically share all of our video and rightfully so, and there seems to be concerns with the share all the video with operation and how it works for discovery purposes. But I think as long as you get your legal folks involved and get the right language in there, that it should say something to the effect of that's your property and you have rights to it.
This is Chip. I'd like to ask one question, if I might, or maybe just a clarifying point, which I think is pretty straightforward. But great question, sir. Thanks very much. Cameras like you have, and I've heard at least from one other agency that they've taken that work is here, and he's ready to offer some of the increase your storage costs, correct? His perspective and the experience that his agency had with procurement.
It's the actual uploading of data. And one of the things I failed to mention.
Good afternoon, Doctor, and good afternoon, everyone listening. Didn't it kind of reinforce
we decided to go with backup cameras because the cameras are individually assigned to the officer. The data is programmed into the camera because we
very good information. Largely what I would present would be very, very similar to what the chief did. In fact, I really have no qualms with it. He did a very good job of presenting some of the issues. I do want to touch and reinforce some of the statements that he did make, however, and kind of tell you a little bit about our procurement process and some of the experiences that we had.
Our SWAT team.
We started looking at cameras back in 2013. We did a much shorter duration pilot project. Ours was only 60 days. We looked at 5 different manufacturers. But from that, we got some good information. Unfortunately, at the time, it was just too darn expensive. So a lot of the research we did was put into a file cabinet and put under lock and key until the Ferguson incident happened. Once that occurred, then we pulled everything out, and then we started the RFP process.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Request for proposal.
One more question for you, if you have one.
So what we did is we,
please do, yes, go ahead.
I believe it was 7 or 8 different proposals that we had from the manufacturers based on our specifications. From there, we narrowed it down to 3 of the major vendors.
Divorce clause.
We lasted about, once we narrowed down to a single vendor, we were in negotiations for approximately 4 to 6 months. And now we're kind of fast forwarding to about April or May of 2015. Initially, we only thought we had $50,000 to spend on cameras. The mayor contributed an extra 100, so we were looking at about $150,000 to spend on cameras.
Give me all your data.
We were hoping to get 50 to 75 cameras out of that money, but as luck would have it, the mayor became involved in our negotiation process, and suddenly $4.3 million fell on our door lap, and that allowed us to take a 50 to 75 camera deployment all the way up to a full deployment of 1,200 cameras.
Was there anything that was addressed within that contract?
So again, I would reinforce that you definitely do the research on the front end.
Itself is our property.
Like I said, we did most of it a couple of years in advance of the RFP process. And then actually moved forward and finished up the policy, kind of add some language more pertinent to what had been happening over the last couple of years.
Storage cloud, if you will.
Definitely consult with the IACP, PERF,
for a fee,
and also the ACLU. They all have good information. You may not take away all their talking points or all their information, but they're definitely a good place to start for your policy.
And rightfully
like the chief said, you'll definitely want
to with the cloud and its operation and how it works.
Involve those agencies, involve all the community members you can.
Get your legal folks
they'll want to have a say in what you're doing. Again, you don't have to necessarily take away from it, but hear them out. We did pick up some great ideas from not only our local citizen groups, but also some of the national groups that are involved in body cameras.
Let's move over to Milwaukee now. I know
you'll also want to get involved, like I said, the mayor
and he's ready to offer some of the,
all your elected officials.
Perspectives and the experiences
like I said,
that his agency had
we're
with
kind of
procurement.
lucky and came across many millions of dollars.
Good afternoon, Doctor, and good afternoon,
kind of went to the wayside had we not publicized.
Didn't have much time to prepare for this, so I'm going to kind of reinforce what
not too much in the way of local and federal regulations were concerned for us.
Indicated
this was a primarily
very good
information.
funded
largely what I would present would be very, very similar to what
we did have a couple precursors
that the chief.
In fact, I
wanted
really
to
have
work
no qualms with it.
when we wrote our
good job of presenting
some
of the issues.
And that was
I do want to touch
all cameras to have
some of the
30
seconds
that he did make, however.
And
let me tell you a little bit about our previous 30 seconds of video prior to the time the video came on.
Or was
we started looking at cameras back in 2013. We did a much shorter duration pilot project, and then he also wanted. We looked at 5 different manufacturers.
Point of view mount option.
But from that, we got some good information,
and that narrowed down the field quite heavily.
At the time, it was just too darn expensive.
Conditions.
So a lot of the research we did was put into a file cabinet.
Do your research
on
the front end.
Put under lock and key until
process go by.
The Ferguson
easier.
incident happened.
Definitely be
Once
transparent
that occurred,
and
then
honest
we pulled
with all your
everything
needs.
out. And again, we started the RFP back to mayor
request for proposal.
We hadn't. So what we did is I believe it was 7 or 8 different as far as what the police department's desires were until the negotiation process. The manufacturers based on our
we wish we could have come around on the front end. And
from there, we narrowed it down to 3 of the major. Don't rush your procurement whatsoever. Slow down.
We lasted
the chief
about.
Mentioned. Once we narrowed down to a single vendor, we were in negotiations for approximately 4 to 6 months.
You're going to get a lot of push.
And especially in your
larger urban
about
areas.
April or May of 2015.
Slow it down.
Take your time.
Initially,
right we only thought we had $50,000 to spend on camera
changes and
the mayor contributed an extra 100, so we were looking at about $150,000 to spend on cameers. We were hoping to get 50 to 75 cameras out of that money.
Gentlemen, can you hear me?
As luck would have it, I can.
This is Robert Lynn with the San Antonio Police Department.
In our negotiation process.
I wanted to just chime in on something you said earlier. I didn't have a chance to get in there. On the issue of spare cameras.
50 to
Be
75
careful on
camera
how the
deployment all the
contract
way up
is
to
written,
a full deployment
because when our contract was negotiated by our contract folks and written by them, what were supposed to be spare cameras were entered into the contract as full-service cameras.
We did most of it.
So when we received them, we would be paying the actual licensing and monthly storage fee on them.
Actually move forward and finish up the policy.
We've had to kind of drop back and reassess on that end.
More pertinent to what had been happening over the last couple of years.
We have a 3% overage written into the contract for spares as far as breakage and things like that. But otherwise, anything that we were going to consider spares, which was going to be about 180 cameras out of 2,200, would have been charged to us even though they sat idle. So just a caution there.
Like the chief said, you'll definitely want to.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that.
Involve those agencies, involve all the community members you can.
Correct, and
they'll have a say in what you're doing. Again,
we negotiate
you don't have to necessarily take away from it, but hear them out. We did pick up some great ideas from not only our local citizen groups, but also some of the national groups that are involved in body cameras.
Any other questions at this point? This has been
you also want to get involved, like I said, the mayor and all your elected officials. Like I said, we were kind of lucky and came across many millions of dollars that would have kind of went to the wayside had we not publicized this very strongly.
Willing, and actually at this point in time, I'm in the
not too much in the way of local and federal regulations were concerned for us. This was primarily a project that was funded by the state of Milwaukee. We did have a couple precursors that the chief wanted to work with when we wrote our request for proposal, and that was he wanted all cameras to have a 30-second pre-buffer.
And as a matter of fact,
what I mean by that would be the previous 30 seconds of video prior to the time the video came on or was activated would be recorded
I'd like to invite Tracy Keaton now from JSS to actually talk a little bit about.
And then he also wanted
some guidelines
the officers to have a point of view mount option. And that narrowed down the field quite heavily, just with those two conditions.
Put together their RFPs. So
Greg,
please go ahead.
Again, do your research on the front end. It'll make the procurement process go by much easier.
So good morning.
Definitely be transparent and honest with all your needs. Again, kind of going back to the mayor, we hadn't
one of the partners
quite been open as far as what the police department's desires were until the negotiation process. We wish we could have come around in the front end and been a little more transparent in that respect. Don't rush your procurement whatsoever. Slow down. The chief had mentioned
the
citizen groups kind of push in. You're going to get a lot of push, especially in your larger urban areas. Slow it down. Take your time. Make sure you're doing it right the first time, so you don't have to come around and
but I think some
make
of this
changes
could apply
and renegotiate your
what you're
contracts.
looking for and
that being said, I'll take any questions.
What we've done is put together what we call a generic
Gentlemen, can you hear me?
Proposal. And that is
I can.
a template.
This is Robert Lenny with the San Antonio Police Department.
To assist agencies,
I wanted to just chime in on something that was said earlier. I didn't have a chance to get in there. On the issue of spare cameras, be careful on how the contract is written, because when our contract was negotiated by our contract folks and written by them, what were supposed to be spare cameras were entered into the contract as full service cameras. So when we receive them, we would be paying the actual licensing and monthly storage fee on them. So we've had to kind of drop back and reassess on that end. And we have a 3% overage written into the contract for spares as far as breakage and things like that. But otherwise, anything that we were going to consider spares, which was going to be about 180 cameras out of 2,200, would have been charged to us even though they sat idle. So just a caution there.
And Sergeant Warwick,
thank you very much, sir.
And Chief Petty mentioned
Chip, if I may add, this is Mike Petty again. He's absolutely correct, and I just want to let you guys know we negotiated a separate contract for our backups for our spare cameras.
Make sure that you have a fair and objective process that you engage in, so that it's all above board. There are no issues.
Any other questions at this point? This has been
with citizens,
very interesting. I appreciate the input from everybody.
Everyone that's applying pressure to you politically. So do take your time in looking at how you're procuring and what you're doing.
Go ahead.
So next slide. Next slide, please.
Would you be willing, and actually at this point in time I'm in the process of
what we've done is we've included 10 separate sections. And there's a number of appendices.
Would you be willing to share what you guys did for RFP?
In defining what you
want
to
review it and see what you guys do?
Absolutely.
The RFP will be available on the website.
That's a great question, sir. And as a matter of fact,
it should be made available to you.
I think we could probably provide some other resources
you can cut and paste
those lines. I'd like to invite Craig Uchida now from JSS to actually talk a little bit about
put it up as a PDF as well.
Some guylines and materials that his group put together just to do this.
As I mentioned, there are 10 sections.
Help the
first three
put together
are basically an introduction to hi everyone. The RFP. Good morning. I'm on the an invitation to apply. So good morning and good afternoon. Goals and objectives. I'm Craig Uchida, as Chip mentioned, and there's some general conditions of the strategy that we're one of the partners you would want to include technical assistance endeavor. And when we get to the meat of things, however, I think section evaluating their use of the key area to grant to look at, because it does go into quite a bit of detail about who you want, basic procurement process in terms of as Chief Petty mentioned, some of this can also, though, apply the experience of the vendor efforts, and I know Stephen Fender's going to be talking about that as our references. But I think some of this could apply in terms of what can they guide you to and how you're going about this. What we've done we also put together what we call the qualifications of the staff proposal, and that is who works with the vendor, what kind of model background to assist agencies during this process, and even before the process, configuring everything and giving you confidence about who you're working with. From other agencies, a third component here, and have tried to put together as much information in terms of in the RFP appendix as well, is that we've put together what we call a selection and assessment tool. One of the things I will say and that tool includes different components and different parts. It doesn't include everything, the cameras themselves, and it doesn't replace so as clearly Chief Petty mentioned state or local things about battery life or even federal requirements regarding the battery life, the purchase of what kind of upload, it's simply a guide, and what kind one of the things I wanted to reinforce with all of those things are built into the tool and are also built into is that a list of things in section 4, and I think all of this. And one of the things you want to do clearly both in terms make sure that you have a fair and research you should be doing in looking for the appropriate vendor. And then when you're have this that you have out, it should help you with the application, with city council that you receive, everyone, and it should also help you pressure to you politically. So do take your applications that you get. That is, you really want to know if they're answering your question, because that's the critical part about within this generic RFP. And so what we've done is we've included 10 separate sections. And there's a number of appendices that Chief Petty mentioned is to invest in defining financial stability of the contract. You really can and should will be available on the website from the camera website from the vendor. You want to find out. It should be made available to you in a Word document so that you can cut and paste as you see fit. And because you don't want to, and I believe we'll put it out as a PDF as well over the next 2 or 3 years that you're working with hard copy of it. I think it's important to ask. As I mentioned, there are 10 sections. Next slide. The first 3 sections are basically an introduction to Section 8. Also talks about very an invitation to apply the information and requirement objectives of the camera, and there's some general conditions of the agreement that it does include language you would want to include within the about the data ownership. When we get to the question about data ownership, I think Section 4, for example, is a key area to it should be a requirement because it does go into quite a bit of your contract. About it also asks you what you want and what kind of information you want. Technical things, as Chief Petty mentioned, maintenance and so forth that you want the vendor to is really in Section 9 you. And as talks a little bit about how you want to evaluate the selection of cameras, who can they guide you to, that you look at. We also mentioned things about how the qualifications are to use, what kind of functionality, etc. Who works with the vendor, what kind of background you engage in a testing period, because those obviously are very important. So figuring everything and giving you confidence about one of the things that vendors are happy to do. A third component here, concept, and I'll talk a little bit about 90 days in terms of you should take advantage of that as well. You should ask that we put together what we call a selection, however many cameras you'd like to test over a certain period and that tool includes different components and different become comfortable with that. The cameras themselves, should build that into the RFP. That we think you're looking very clearly that there will be a testing period and things about battery and evaluation. How long is going to be looking at battery life and assessing what kind of upload and what kind of storage and what kind of sharing I think that's capability. A really critical part. All of those things are built into the tool and are also built into a list of things what you're getting and how useful they are. And I hope that can help you. So both in terms of the kind of research you should be doing in looking for the appropriate vendor, and then when you're and one, as I mentioned, RFP out, it should help you with the application. The vendor has to fill in that you receive, and it should also help you in assessing aspects of the camera. So, for instance, applications one of the questions we ask is how heavy you really want to know if what kind of battery they're answering your question, because that's the critical part about what kind of performance about all of it. And so should we expect? I would think that and also some very specific questions about the video resolution. One thing too that Chief Petty mentioned is to assess the financial stability of the contractor. So you really can and should request financial statements from. It'll give you a good idea from the vendor. What they're you want to find out, and then you can look at it and then compare it with other vendors and what they're saying. How old the other part too that it asks about training because you don't want to training do they provide, who do they provide it to, 2 or 3 years that you're working with them. So I think it's important to ask those kinds of questions as well. Next slide, please. The other thing I want to mention in the Section 8 appendix is that also talks we also about very specific a technology information and requirements that you want. So, and I want to mention a lot of ways too that it does include language, budget, and a clause about the data ownership. So the question about data ownership, very specifically about software, very specifically about services. The RFP, and it should be a requirement enables you to add up everything for you in your contract. And it also asks for basic characteristics of the camera. The other things in the appendix include things like maintenance and so forth that you want answers to. Section 9 with the name, address, a little bit about how you want to evaluate and then lastly, the selection of cameras. We general language that about standard conditions in terms of the contract. How easy so that's cameras really are to use, what kind of functionality, etc. Overall, we also suggest that, like I say, you engage in a testing period of the camera. So as Chief Petty mentioned. One of the things that
Great, Craig, thank you very much. We have time for a question or two of Craig 60, at this point, and I will let everybody know that the link to that PDF does exist on the body-worn camera website, which I'll refer you to in a few minutes.
Cast over a certain period of time so that you and your office become comfortable with that.
Go ahead.
And you can build that into the RFP that
as far as cautionary tales,
that there will be a testing period.
Be cautious of your vendors and looking at their history.
Going to be looking at these and assessing them accordingly.
Some of the things that we have experienced here.
So, I think that's a really critical part.
This came more along the lines from our in-car video solutions.
As well,
is look at these.
You get a real sense of
the
what you're getting and how useful they are.
Patent to that company because we ran into some issues with some companies that were basically
which includes a number
venture capital type venture,
different appendices. And
one, as I mentioned, as soon as it became unprofitable, all the venture capitalists said, well, we'll take our money and go now. And then the company just went up in the air. The company had been around for quite some time.
One of the questions we ask is how
they had an issue. That issue cost a ton of money to resolve. And as soon as it became an unprofitable venture, they were gone.
What kind of performance?
So I have a tendency to want to stay away from venture capital type
specific questions about the video resolution.
At least that's where their money comes
maximum capacity of it.
Thank you, sir.
So forth. So hopefully, because they have to
turn this over to Stephen Fender now. I know Stephen has a few things he wants to go over regarding Justice Department guidelines.
Look at it and then compare it with other vendors.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Chip. And thanks to everybody who's gone so far, the Sergeant and the Deputy Chief. It's Craig. That was great information. And some of these points we touched on so far, I mean, that level of detail and the sort of the thoughtful consideration regarding your procurement is exactly what we're looking for. And I think those sort of cautionary points regarding investigating the background of your vendors, potential vendors, it's just a great tip, and that's certainly something that we would look forward to reviewing.
In a way, it follows the guidelines.
The most important thing to consider when using Office of Justice Programs funds is to ensure that competition takes place when making your procurement decisions.
software.
This can certainly take a number of different forms. There are many ways that this requirement can be met. However, when deciding how you should ensure competition, you should follow your state and procurement guidelines. This has been mentioned several times so far. And for those agencies that don't have local procedures that require competition, we had Craig just went over a really good resource. We also have a few examples of checklists for completing bids and sort of an overview of the process from a very simple procurement to a much more complex procurement that we expect to see for the larger dollar amount. And that resource is available in the Federal Procurement Guide that we'll link to at the end of this presentation.
Available to you on the Body One Camera website.
So for documentation,
and that's it.
Certainly we've talked about a lot of sort of,
Craig, thank you very much.
A lot of specific details as being thoughtful about procurement. The template talks about that. The procurement guide talks about that. So in order to determine compliance, certainly from BJA's perspective, that you need to ensure that all documentation that shows the procurement process is maintained. But it sounds like, we're recommending here a lot of thoughtfulness as it relates to procurement, and it's really important that the thinking that has taken place and the steps that took place during procurement is documented and maintained by our grantees for later review.
Of your vendors.
Overall, we expect to see at a minimum regarding procurement. In my mind, there's sort of like three big pieces here. What you ask for, or the content or the RFP. Making sure not to be too specific because we're writing an RFP to match a particular product, and then what you received, so the vendor response, the documentation that shows what the vendor came back to you with, and then the third piece is what you decided based upon that information and an articulation of ensuring best value. So those are sort of the three pillars that really kind of oversimplifies the process, but from our perspective, remember deferring back to local guidelines, referring to the template, referring to the procurement guide. So these are the things we would look for and would expect to see upon review.
That issue cost a ton of money to resolve, and as soon as it
I also want to talk a little bit about the GSA schedules for procurement.
I have a
tendency for those many don't know, that's a good resource for using federal funds, grant funds. You can purchase off the GSA schedule, and what they provide, as you see here, I indicated a streamlined process. So procurement still takes place. That's frequently a bit of a concern. Confusion for grantees. It's just a different streamlined process. So depending on the threshold, there's a micro threshold. There's a simplified
and thanks to everybody who's gone so far.
And that's always the dollar amount.
It's Craig out South Credit information, and some of these points we touched on so far, and that level of detail and the sort of the thoughtful consideration regarding your procurement is exactly what we're looking for.
Using a government credit card.
And I think those sort of cautionary points regarding investigating the background of your potential vendor. It's just a great tip.
Following their procedures,
that's certainly something we would look forward to reviewing
the decision,
how that led to best value.
Can we go next slide?
And this allows you to sort of save time on procurement.
The most important thing to consider
when using
all of the cameras listed on their schedules, they do have a good fair amount
takes place.
For more details regarding how to navigate the GSA
certainly takes a number of different forms. There are many ways that this requirement can be met.
There's a slightly more robust level of procurement that takes place over $150,000.
You follow your state and procurement guidelines. This electronic invoice, RFPs to the vendor.
For those agencies that don't have
same process. Still the required competition. We talked about what you asked for, what you received, and how you made your decision. We also have a piece that will be a few examples of dinner review. Checklists for completing bids, on the point that was made earlier regarding of the process from procurement. Simple. Procurement is a much more complex nationally for agencies that are the larger dollar amount to purchase, and that resource is available in the following procurement guide. They're ready to move forward and make the purchase by the end of this presentation. It's really important that today you follow the procurement guidelines, your own procurement guidelines, and then check with your federal staff to make sure you're complying, because, a lot of specific details is being thoughtful about procurement. The template talks about that. The procurement guide talks about that. So in order to determine compliance, certainly from BJA's perspective, there's one that you need to ensure that all documentation that shows the procurement process is maintained, also known as sole source. Sounds like we're recommending here a lot of thoughtfulness as it relates to procurement. And it's really important that non-competitive procurement be considered, that it's taken place in the steps that took place during procurement. Most frequently, what we hear from our is the items only available for a single source. Overall, we have to see at a minimum regarding procurement. In my mind, there's sort of like that's not going to, typically that would be something like a large-scale disaster in which we would need to get supplies or some other emergency services we're writing in our locality, and that would be when there's a particular product. And then what are you going to apply to just a compressed timeline? The documentation that shows what the vendor came back to you with. We wouldn't expect that sort of. And then the third piece is what you number three, that would apply information by word camera grantees and our articulation of ensuring best value. So those are sort of the three pillars. Allow for proposals part of the solicitation. Kind of oversimplifies the process, but number four, perspective. Remember, here's so far back to local guidelines, referring to the template of a number of procurement guides determined to be inadequate. We would look for. I would expect to see if be glad to hear from you if you think otherwise. That there's a lot of competition at this time for body cameras. I also want to talk a little bit about that GSA for possibility you follow that category. So we would consider it to submit it. Is it really, so the first, number one is the available from single source. It's likely to be the one that's been applied so far. And what they provide, that's it's really important when thinking through the documentation that you sort of align with our financial guide. And not financial guide on page 65. We have a template for sole source justification. There's 7 bullets there, and for those that have gone through this or listening, and maybe will talk to me, certainly very familiar with these 7 bullets, because these require that you address each one of these. These include things like a description of the product and service, like an overview, a detailed explanation of why the service is necessary to contract non-competitively. This would touch on areas like organizational expertise, management, knowledge of the program, specific characteristics of a camera that may or may not be available from other vendors, etc. And then a actual coverage, outline the details, at this time they don't have detailed unique qualities of the contractor, etc. So if we take a look at that, if you're thinking about moving that direction, that is an important guide, and all that documentation will need to be filled out in detail. And be very thorough about each step. Procurement that takes place now, over the $150,000. As you see in the bottom slide indicated, you send the electronic invoice, the RFP to vendors and receive information back. Under $150,000, the same piece that we talked about, approved by BJ. What you asked for, what you received, and how you made your guidelines. So those are all the pieces that we expect to see robust documentation and review of each one of those elements. Follow up on the point that was made earlier regarding public pressure versus procurement. So over 150 will take a pretty common theme. We'll take a look. Please document all for agencies that are ready to go, and we'll go through each one of those and following sort of public pressure. They're ready to move forward and make their purchase. I would encourage you, if you're considering about really important that today you follow the procurement guidelines, your own procurement guidelines, and then check with your federal staff to make sure you're complying. These are because quite difficult to. It's going to be worth it to go through if you've never done it before, and we will be glad to provide with some extra information and support. So we talk about ensuring competition. So there's one exception to competition, and that's the non-competitive. So I mentioned a couple resources, the financial guide, the procurement guide. There are 4 circumstances in which the sole source resources do a better job of representing information than I'm ever going to be here for you. Please, most frequently, procurement we hear from or use the items only available for a single source. Please take a look at these pieces. The financial guide, you want your guide, if number 2, state and local public emergency guidelines. That's not going to sort of typically that would be right like a large-scale disaster. Please look at that, for an example. Certainly, we need to get supplies. Take a look at some other emergency services to locality, and you can always certainly contact your BJ staff representative. Not typically going to apply to just a compressed timeline to meet sort of to get roll cameras out. We wouldn't expect that to sort of fit within number 2. Number 3, that wouldn't apply for most byword camera grantees, as we have. As this has not been determined to allow for non-competitive proposals for solicitation. And then number 4, as I mentioned here so far, after solicitation of a number of sources, competition determined to be inadequate. So it's my sense, and we'll certainly be glad to hear from you if you think otherwise, that there's a lot of competition at this time for body cameras. And so that may be less likely the possibility you follow that category, but we would consider it to submit it. So the number 1 is the available from single source is likely to be the one that's been applied so far. And that's really important when thinking through the documentation that you sort of align with our financial guide. And our financial guide on page 65, we have a template for sole source justification. There's 7 bullets there, and for those that have gone through this and are listening, and maybe they'll talk to me, certainly are very familiar with these bullets, because these are required that you address each one of these. These include things like a description of the product and service, like an overview, a detailed explanation of why the service is why it's necessary to contract non-competitively. This would touch on areas like organizational expertise, management, knowledge of the program, specific characteristics of a camera that may or may not be available from other vendors, etc. And then a statement about contractual coverage, outline the detailed unique qualities of the contractor, etc. So please take a look at that if you're thinking about moving in that direction. That is an important guide, and all that documentation will need to be filled out in detail and be very thorough about each step. Now, as you see at the bottom of the slide indicated that non-competitive proposals that exceed the simplified acquisition threshold must be approved. So that means anything under $150,000 does not have to be approved by BGA. However, all these same guidelines do apply, and we would expect robust documentation of each one of those elements.
Milwaukee, when the vendors came in, most of them had some sort of backup
system. So over
150
will take a look at them, and we'll take a look. You please document all 7. You submit that to your BGA contact, and we'll go through each one of those and verify chain commands to our financial office. I would encourage you, if you're considering about submitting a sole source justification, contacting your BJA representative,
but again, it's only 60 days worth of video.
We're talking through these points on the same page.
To tell you the truth, we haven't had
access at this quite difficult to go through if you've never done it before, and we'll be glad to provide with some extra information and support
me just bring this to a
help you through that process.
At this point, make a couple closing remarks.
All right,
remind everybody.
So I mentioned a couple of resources, the financial guide and the procurement guide. These two resources do a better job of representing the information than I'm ever going to do. Please, if you're thinking about procurement, as you move through that process, as you use our federal funds, please take a look at these pieces of the financial guide and the procurement guide if needed, if your state and local guidelines sort of in your mind don't rise to the level of competition. Please look at that for an example. Certainly see take a look at the piece Craig talked about for our template, and you can always certainly contact your BGA staff.
Would you mind if I
representative
just made one comment? One thing I didn't hear, that I've seen in a couple of sites, this is Mike Rose of BJA, is conflict of interest. For agencies just venturing into this, recognizing there are multiple people within the agency and possibly within the procurement arm that may have worked with body-worn camera vendors.
Forgive me, I was on mute. I'm back.
I would just recommend agencies ask that none of the employees involved in the procurement decision have a contractual or any kind of solid relationship with any particular vendor that could jeopardize your procurement. We've seen a couple of agencies have to back out of procurement because of identified relationships, and these could just be that the officers are trainers for the vendor that they send to other sites, but they're paid. So the perception over necessarily the actual opportunity. So just in the procurement sense,
to do the downloading and uploading,
diligence on identifying conflict of interest.
How does testing work when departments don't have all the infrastructure that's necessary? Excellent point, Mike. Thank you very much.
Chip,
I just want to remind everybody that the materials that we talked about here are available on the body-worn camera technical assistance website.
We're in a situation here where we do have a robust IT department.
If you Google
however, they're external, they're not within the police department.
TTA.com, you will find it.
That was one of the
and there's
reasons
also
we
an opportunity on that website
storage,
for you to ask us questions. So
not to say that
if you didn't have time today, or
along with our IT,
if some questions occur to you in the future, please feel free to contact us.
We don't get along with our IT sometimes,
and we will respond as quickly and as completely as we can.
We examined many
thanks to Mike Petty and Doug Ward,
the thing that overwhelms us more than anything is if you take an hour's worth of video,
putting this webinar together.
That's one gigabyte
earlier,
of memory.
The engagement
so
and
if
the
you have a rather
asking
large
and
department,
comments,
it doesn't take you long to do the math to realize that can quickly add up, especially if you have
shared on this website are exactly what we were looking
for. I remember there was an agency
in this kind
in Virginia when we were up there for the TTA that said they had for felony cases a 65-year retention.
Today.
I can't imagine how much storage that's going to take in 65 years if they have to retain all their videos from felony investigations. So that was a major factor with the outside storage for us.
Okay.
For Milwaukee, when the vendors came in, most of them had some sort of back-end system that we could put the videos in. And then once the contract or the pilot period was up, we simply moved those videos into a separate storage server within the IT department. So the accessibility to them is a little awkward at best, but again, it's only 60 days worth of video, and we, tell you the truth, we haven't had to access them at this point.
Yep. Okay, so let me just bring this to a conclusion at this point, make a couple closing remarks. Remind everybody that you'll, in very short order, you'll receive an opportunity to evaluate this webinar. I did mention that this is the first webinar that we have held under the Body-Worn Camera Technical Assistance Program, so we're extremely interested in your thoughts about how it went, if the information was pertinent to your needs, if there are other webinars that you think we should be offering. So please pay close attention to that, and please complete that and send it back to us. Let me also just...
This is Mike Rosa.
Yeah, Mike.
Would you mind if I just made one comment? One thing I didn't hear, but I've seen in a couple of sites, this is Mike Rosa of BJA, is conflict of interest. For agencies just venturing into this, recognizing there are multiple people within the agency and possibly within the procurement arm that may have worked with body-worn camera vendors, I would just recommend agencies ask that none of the employees involved in the procurement decision have a contractual or any kind of solid relationship with any particular vendor that could jeopardize your procurement. We've seen a couple agencies have to back out of procurements because of identified relationships, and these could just be that the officers are trainers for the vendor that they send to other sites, but they're paid. So it's the perception over necessarily the actual opportunity. So just in the procurement sense, do due diligence on identifying conflict of interest, and then move on. You guys, great job on the presentations, though.
Excellent point, Mike. Thank you very much. So I just want to remind everybody that the materials that we talked about here are available on the Body-Worn Camera Technical Assistance website. It's posted here. If you Google BWCTTA.com, you will find it. And there's also an opportunity on that website for you to ask us questions. So if you didn't have time today, or if some questions occur to you in the future, please feel free to contact us, and we will respond as quickly and as completely as we can. Let me again say thanks to Mike Petty and Doug Warwick, Craig Uchida, and Stephen Fender for working with us on putting this webinar together. As Stephen said earlier, the engagement and the question asking and the comments and the experience that have been shared on this website are exactly what we were looking for in this kind of an engagement. So we appreciate everybody's time and everybody's thoughtfulness and everybody's participation today. I'm going to close shop with that, okay? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.